The dashdash Crunchbase integration gives you access to data about startups, investors, founders, and other relevant people and organizations in tech. To use the Crunchbase integration, you will need to connect it in your dashdash account. All you have to do is head to the Integrations Marketplace, find the Crunchbase integration, click Connect, add a payment method if you haven't already, and you're good to go. In this video, we will first cover the different functions of this integration before we show you some tips and tricks on how to make the most out of them. First, the functions. If you want to get more information about a specific company, you can use the function Companies by Name Crunchbase. Enter the company name and, if needed, a location, and retrieve data like employee count, company email address, phone number, number of funding rounds, total funding amount, and more. You can also search for lists of companies and their information based on certain criteria and filters that you define, such as size, location, investment stage, category, and more. With Companies by Size Crunchbase, you can look up companies by size, category, location, and founding date. You can use Companies by Investors Crunchbase to find companies with specified investors. You can also filter by last funding date, last funding type, and location. Companies by Funding Crunchbase gets you companies by funding based on the last funding date, last funding type, last funding capital, total funding, and, if needed, location and category. If you want to create a list of companies founded by people with a particular past employer, use Companies by Ex-Employer Crunchbase and specify the company's location, founding date, and the names of one or more companies that they previously worked at. You can even get a list of companies led by founders who were previously working for a company that exited with Companies by Founders with Exit. You simply define the company's location, founding date, exit amount, and exit date. Companies at Event Crunchbase lets you get a list of companies attending a certain event. Define the event name and then filter the results by number of employees and the company's location. Lastly, you can even use Sector Funding Crunchbase to keep track of funding activities within a specific sector by specifying the last funding date, company's location, and category. Now that we covered all functions of the Crunchbase integration, let's talk about some hints that will help you use the functions more effectively. You can filter by additional search parameters with any of these functions. For locations, you can enter a country, region, city, or state. For dates, you can use the less than and greater than signs to search before or after a certain date or year. You need to at least specify a year. Then you can specify the month and day if needed. You can also define a specific date range, giving you full control to get the results that you're looking for. For funding types and company categories, make sure to check out these links to get a full list of available funding types and categories. You can also find them in the function helper within dashdash. Your parameters need to match one of these values for the functions to work properly. You can also use the greater than sign to search for a certain stage or later. For the Companies by Investors Crunchbase function, if you enter the names of more than one investor separated by commas, you will get the companies that either investor invested in. The same goes for the Companies by Ex-Employer Crunchbase function, where if you enter more than one company, you will get the companies founded by alumni of any of these companies. For functions that have multiple optional parameters, you can skip any of the parameters by adding commas and leaving the parameter blank. For example, if you're using the Companies at Event function and you only want to retrieve a list of companies that attended a specific event from a certain location with any number of employees, simply skip the employees parameter by adding commas and leaving it blank. Finally, note that companies and investors' names need to match their respective names on Crunchbase so that you can retrieve accurate results. Once you have the list of companies you want, you can easily map out the information in one of three ways, using Insert Data, Overwrite Data, or Update Data. With all of these functions, make sure you first parse the organizations into a cell. Then you can refer to this data and select the headers of the table you want to send this data to. Use the Insert Data function to create a data log. You choose the data you want to fill into the table and the headers of this table. It instantly maps out the information inside the object matching the selected headers. Whenever you make a new request again, it will keep adding new rows to the bottom of the table's pre-existing ones, creating a data log. Overwrite Data lets you work with the data of your last request. It does the exact same thing, except that instead of adding new rows to the list, It will replace any pre-existing cells below the target header with new data following every execution of the function. So be cautious not to delete any data you want to keep. Finally, update data helps you keep an updated list of companies. It inserts the data, but it also takes a list of keys, like the company domain for example, which are the reference values to match with. The function will then check if there are any changes in the data relative to the key in order to decide if new data will be added or just updated. This is particularly useful if you're building a company tracker to stay updated on. Say, all the companies with certain funding in your industry, your leads or competitors, and just want the data to update periodically. The Crunchbase functions are charged per request. This means that you get charged every time you execute a function. That's why we advise you to add a trigger or action element, like a button, that controls the execution of the function to avoid multiple charges when making changes to the input parameters. Once you've retrieved your lists of companies from Crunchbase, you can combine them with other data-enriched integrations like Hunter, People, and Clearbit, or send them to your CRM using the integrations with HubSpot, Pipedrive, or Zoho. Now you've learned about the Crunchbase integration and can start using it to search for companies with dashdash.